Hello folks, this is Hannibal from your medical team. This video is going to be about tourniquets. Now, I made a tourniquet video about a year ago when I was with AmCon, and my intention was to just post it up here for all of you. But I was never really happy with that video. What I showed in that was how to use our IFAKs that I put together and gave out to people, and the materials in there to improvise tourniquets. What I wish I had done that I just wasn't able to at the time was to show you how to use the different commercial tourniquets. And the reason why I couldn't do it at times, I didn't have examples of all of them, but I do now. So your commercial tourniquets basically fall into three different styles. What I'm going to show in this video, instead of going with that old video, I'm going to remake it. And today I'm going to show you how to use the three different styles of commercial tourniquets, as well as how you can improvise a tourniquet. So that's what we're going to work on today, so stay tuned. Okay, so there's three basic styles of commercial tourniquets. If I miss one, if there's some other style out there, y'all want to know more about it, let me know, and I'll be happy to make another video and add that in there. But as far as my knowledge goes, there's three basic types. The first one we're going to talk about is what they call the CAT tourniquet, or the combat application tourniquet. This is a very popular tourniquet. It's been issued in the military. As far as I know, North American Rescue is the one that came up with it. Now, I like them as a tourniquet. They're a little pricey, I feel, but I understand they're good quality, but they're about $30 a piece from North American Rescue. And there's all kinds of kits and holders and things for them. What I have here today, I'm going to show you, is not a North American Rescue CAT tourniquet. It is a knockoff from China that I got off eBay for about $5, and I use it for training. However, it is a perfectly functional tourniquet. So this is my web belt that I carry with me, and when I go hiking or for any other activities, if I'm going to go out with it. And I've got IFAK on it, and another little IFAK bag that I carry a few things in, like a poncho and stuff, extra mags. But I've got this. This is a carrier. It's a tourniquet carrier. It's made specifically to hold CAT tourniquets. I got this for like $5 off of eBay. It's got MOLLE. You can strap it on the side of a pack. I just loop it over my belt, carry it this way. This is elastic, and it's really easy just to pop it open and pull out your CAT tourniquet. They make specific ones for CAT tourniquets made out of Kydex and things like that, but once again, it gets into a price thing. So for about $5, one of those little things is really handy. So, but this is what a CAT tourniquet looks like. It's a windlass style tourniquet, and when you open it, it looks like that. It's made out of webbing material. And on the inside of that webbing material, there is a ribbon that's attached to this windlass. So when you tighten that windlass up, that ribbon tightens up inside of this web belt. When you set these up, you should preset them. There's a tip that's red, and when you pull it, you can see you can pull this back and forth through the buckle. The way you kind of preset these up is you want to set it up about like this, and then you can line this up and fold this back underneath, and it'll set inside of a holder. But this way you have it ready to go if you have to apply it. And the way you apply this, when you pull it out of the holder and it looks like this, you can slide it. If you have it preset like this, you can slide it over an arm or a leg. This red tip should always point towards the center of the body, or towards the heart. It's not as important when you're applying it on someone else as when you're applying it to yourself, but you might as well get into that habit, and I'll show you why here in a minute when I apply it to myself. But the way this tourniquet works is you can slide it up the arm, you pull that red tab loose, then you can pull this and cinch it down. This is a very small diameter arm. You can see you cinch it down, then you take this Velcro and loop it back around here and attach it. Then at this point, you turn the windlass, and this will tighten the tourniquet down. I'm not going to tighten it down overly tight on this arm because it's a hard plastic arm. There's no give, and it'll just break pulling against this. I'll do it on my arm so you can see it. But once you get the tourniquet tight, there's 2 ears here that, depending on which direction you crank the tourniquet, you can slip it under those ears, and that will lock it in place. And then you can slide this tab over top. That will keep the windlass from coming loose, and you can write the time on here, what time you applied the windlass. Then the last step, and this is very important, is you take the rest of this and you wrap it back around and attach it. And I'll show you why that's important in a minute. And of course, the way that you want to be able to determine if your tourniquet's effective is once you have it on, you should be able to check for a pulse. And you can check for a radial pulse right in this area, and you can feel it on yourself. You should not be able to feel a pulse when you have the tourniquet in place. And of course, the whole reason you're putting the tourniquet in place is because you want to stop bleeding. So you can usually tell pretty quickly if you've got the tourniquet tight enough because the bleeding will stop. The preferred place, when I was in the Army and I first got my training many, many years ago, the recommended way to put on a tourniquet, and by the way, there were no commercial tourniquets. Anything we did was all improvised. But the correct placement of a tourniquet was you were supposed to put it about 6 inches above the wound. So if you had a wound in your forearm, you just go up about 6 inches and you place it. Now they've changed that over the years. The theory is you want to put the tourniquet in the upper part of the limb, either the upper part of the arm or the upper part of the leg. The reason for that is your arm, the lower part of your arm and your leg both, has 2 bones. And if that artery is laying between those bones, when you tighten that tourniquet down, you're not able to adequately push the artery up against the bone to ensure that you're going to clamp it off. Where the upper part of your arm and the upper part of your leg only has 1 bone. So it's much easier to make sure when you're tightening that down, you're actually squeezing that artery down and blocking off that blood flow. Now, one of the nice things about the cat tourniquet is when you have it staged properly and you pull it out, it's very easy to self-apply. And I'm going to demonstrate that now. Now, remember I told you when you're putting it on to point this red tip towards the heart. And just get in the habit of doing that, or towards the center line of the body. There's a reason for that. If you're going to slide this up over your arm, and then you grab that red tip and you pull it. And what you're doing is cinching this down tight. If it's not positioned where you want it, because you want this windlass where you can get hold of it, you can simply pull this up or down and move it where you want it. And if you tighten it down and you pull it down too far, it's easy to lift it back up and snug it down some more. If you have that red tip pointed away from your body, that makes it much more difficult to do. Because what happens is, when you're trying to cinch that thing tight, you've got to cinch it away from you like this, and you end up pulling it back this way. And you end up with this windlass back here where you can't reach it, and it's hard to get it back around. So that's why it's just better to get in the habit of keeping that red tip pointed towards the center line of your body, even when you're applying it on somebody else, and that just makes it easier for you to control it. So we're going to pull this down and snug it down, and you're going to fasten that Velcro. All right, and I've got the windlass here where I can get my grip on it, and I'm going to tighten down the windlass. Now, as I said, this is not a North American Rescue tourniquet. This is a cheaper knockoff tourniquet. But I don't have a pulse, so it's worked. I thought I had to crank it another crank, but that's enough right there to obliterate my pulse. My arm is already going numb. Now I've locked that in underneath those ears. Take this tab and pull it across. Now you pull this over and fasten it under there. If you have enough Velcro left for it to fasten. If you have it tight enough, it may not. But the reason you want to pull that down and get it out of the way is if you leave it dangling like this, when you go to transport the patient, or if you go to move yourself, if you do that, you've just released it. it's loose now, see? So it's important to take that extra and tuck it. So the cat tourniquet, it's a very good tourniquet. There's nothing wrong with these at all. I like them. The only complaint I have is the price. Next kind of tourniquet I'm going to talk about is the RATS tourniquet. And I don't remember what that stands for. Something like Rapid Application Tourniquet. I could look it up on the internet and tell you, but I really don't even care to. I don't like these things. But I'm going to show you one just so you know what it is. So this is what a RATS tourniquet looks like. It's basically just a little piece of bungee cord, and it's connected with this little odd looking metal clip. The way this tourniquet works is you take one end of it, you take the end of it I should say, and you put it through this hole and pull it up, and you leave a little loop like this. And then these two ears, they're sort of like a cleat on a boat, if you've ever, and you can wrap it around these cleats to lock it in place. So let's go over the mannequin and I'll show you how this one is applied. Okay, so the way you apply the RATS tourniquet is you just lay it over the arm and you take that free end and you put it through this loop that you made. Then you cinch it tight on the arm and then you wrap it. And you just wrap it around, pulling it tight. This mannequin arm is hard to work on, it flops around a lot. You wrap it around like this, and then when you get it where you want it, you loop it around this cleat to lock it in place. And that's all there is to it. Very simple to apply. It's a little harder to do it to yourself, but as far as putting on a second person, it's not bad. I don't like this. I think I already said that. I'll say it again. I don't like these. What I've heard people say is that these are good for children and dogs. It's not overly difficult to self-apply this, but I have a very hard time occluding my pulse when I put this on. It just does. It's not very effective. It doesn't work good for me. Maybe I just got pretty good sized arms. I don't know, but it's not hard to self-apply. You just lay it over your arm, feed it through that loop, and then you can cinch it tight. The other thing I don't like about this is when you get it stretched, that basically it's like a shoestring around your arm. It's a very small surface area, so it does tend to cut into those tissues. Now, I still have a pulse, so that's not tight enough, and that's very painful. It's really cutting into my arm, and it's a lot tighter than what I had to put the cat tourniquet on, and I still didn't include my pulse. So I'm gonna try again. I don't know if I can get this thing tight enough to occlude it. No, I still have a pulse, and I'm not going to keep doing this and abusing myself. So they can be used probably on a child, somebody with a smaller arm. That's already, I'm leaving a bruise there already. Somebody with a smaller arm, a child, a pet. It might be an effective tourniquet, but for an adult, this would not be my first choice. I guess if somebody was bleeding and this was all that we had available, I would try it and do my best to get it tight enough, but I just have a very difficult time occluding my pulse with this. So it's not my favorite tourniquet, but as I said, the whole point of this was just to introduce you to the different styles of tourniquet. If you've never seen it, you might see that in somebody's first aid kit and not even know what it was. So at least now you recognize it's a RATS tourniquet. But if this is all they have, use it, but keep looking. See if you can find something else. I bought this just for making this video, which I've been planning on making this for about a year. I'm just now getting around to doing it. I don't carry that in my first aid kit. Got it in a drawer here at the house. It's going to go back in that drawer. I just don't care for it. So, okay. The final style of tourniquet I'm going to talk about is what's called a SWAT tourniquet. And no, it sounds really cool and tactical. It has nothing to do with SWAT teams or police or anything. SWAT stands for stretch, wrap, and tuck. Basically, a SWAT tourniquet is a big rubber band. Now, I don't have one, but I have something else I'm going to show you that I carry that is the same thing. As soon as I saw a SWAT tourniquet, I knew exactly what it was. Somebody had a really smart idea to take something existing and use it as a tourniquet, and they started manufacturing them and selling them. The reason I don't have an actual SWAT tourniquet is I refuse to pay $15 for a rubber band just to make this video. I have no use for it because I have something else. So this is I showed you my web belt earlier when I pulled off the Cat 5 tourniquet. This is my IFAK that I carry with me when I go hiking out in the mountains. And in it, I have a few things, but one of the things I have is a dowel rod, which I can use to improvise a tourniquet. Doesn't take up much space, but you can see wrapped around here, I have this blue thing. I just wrap it around there because it's an easy way to carry it. This is my version of the SWAT tourniquet. What this is, let me just unroll it and get this dowel rod out of here. So what this is a tension band that therapists use to exercise people. And you can see they've got some printing on here. It's Can-Do, C-A-N-D-O is the name of this company that makes these. There's probably other companies, but that's who these are from. And what this is a big old rubber band that's been cut into. It's 4 inches wide or so. Actually, I think it's about 6 inches wide. And it's nitrile and it's very elastic. What therapists do is cut off a hunk of this, tie a knot in each end, and give it to people to use for resistance for exercising. Somebody has seen this and said, hey, that would make a neat tourniquet. I guarantee you that SWAT doesn't have a factory somewhere turning out tourniquets. They're buying them from somebody like this. The only thing different between this and like a SWAT tourniquet is SWAT puts some printing on there that has like some little shapes. They have like a square and they have an oval. And the idea is when you pull this and you get it to the correct tension, that those will change shape. The oval becomes a circle and the square becomes a triangle. I think in an emergency situation, if you're applying it, you're not going to be sitting there looking at that. You're going to put it on and check and see if they have a pulse. So this is basically what a SWAT tourniquet looks like. I'm not going to pay 15 bucks for them. I can get these free from work all day long. So I have probably half a dozen of these cut to 4-foot lengths. I keep them in my first aid kit as a backup tourniquet, and they're also kind of handy for a compression dressing for a wound. You can put a dressing over top of it. You can wrap this over it, and it keeps good compression on there. It doesn't come loose if it gets wet or anything. So let's go to the mannequin. I'll show you how to apply this as a tourniquet. So the way this is applied, this is called a stretch, wrap, and tuck. And it's a little awkward to do on a mannequin because the skin is so slippery. But you stretch it and wrap it. It's hard to get a lot of stretch until you get that first loop on there. So it's sitting on top of each other. Then you can really crank it out. In this case, I have to crank it a couple of loops because it will slide on the skin. But once you get it wrapped a little bit, you can really crank this out. This mannequin is not cooperating. And you just stretch it and wrap it. Nice and tight. And as you can see, when you're putting it on somebody else, you can keep a nice wide band over there. And I think you can see how this would make for a very nice compression dressing as well. Now, I've got these cut to about 4 feet. You could probably do for about 3 if it's a small arm like this, but somebody like my size, or if you're going to wrap around the leg, I want to have some extra. So I've cut these kind of long. But you just wrap it around. And when you get to the end, the idea is just to tuck it under, the stretch, wrap, and tuck. The way I would do it is cut a couple fingers under there on that last loop and then pull it through. That's easier than trying to get hold of it and pull it up so you can get under it. And that's all there is to it. It's very easy to apply. I've heard these criticized they're not very good tourniquets. And they aren't great, but I would take one of these over a rat's tourniquet any day of the week. They can be self-applied, but that's something, if you think you're going to carry one of these, you should practice. Self-applying one of these is going to be tough. It can be done. I've done it myself, and I'm going to do it here in a minute. But it tends to, you don't get that nice big wide thing. When I put it on myself, it tends getting up more like a rat's tourniquet where it gets narrow, and it's a little awkward to do. If you're going to carry one of these, which I think is a good idea, if nothing else, they make really good compression dressings. So like I said, I always keep one in my first aid kit. But if you're going to carry one and you think you might want to use it as a tourniquet someday, practice. If you got a friend who's a physical therapist or anybody that works in a hospital or a nursing home setting, see if they can't hook you up with some of these. It's all over the place. If I had a group, what I would probably do, and when I put out the IFAK kits for AMCON, and I say we, it started as a group effort, but to be honest with you, by the time it was done, it was 99% me. I put together those IFAKs and distributed them for free with donated materials. I kind of wished that I was able to put these in afterwards. I thought about it and thought it would have been really nice to get enough of these that I could have put in the kits. But I just didn't think of it at the time I was making them. And also, money was pretty tight. That stuff was all donated materials. But if I had a group, then I was going to do these. This stuff, these exercise bands, you can buy this off of Amazon. It comes in different colors. This is a blue. This is the strongest that we have at work. I've also got a green one, which is the resistance below that. I've used that, and that works fine too. I can use that on myself. It's a little more stretchy. There's a black, which is above this, and then there's a couple more above that. I would like to actually try the black. I think that would probably even be better. That's most of the SWAT tourniquets are black, so I have a feeling that's the material they're using, although they do make some other ones, some other colors. They make an orange and I think a green, that they say the green is for training, and the orange is supposed to be like for paramedics and stuff. But these exercise bands come in different colors too, so I think they're just using the different material. But I digress. The black would be good. What I was doing, if I had a group, you can buy a roll of this at 50 yards for 50 bucks, something like that. So basically $1 a yard. And I make these a little longer than a yard. Like I said, I go to about 4 feet with them. I don't actually measure them. I just kind of roughly pull out about 4 feet. You could get by with a yard, but like I said, for wrapping a leg, I think I'd want 4 feet. So out of 50 yards, you could get 30 some tourniquets out of that. So if I had a group, if I was, for example, doing those IFAK kits again, I would probably just try to get some donations, get a few bucks in, where I could afford to buy a roll of this, and then just sit down and cut off 4-foot sections and give one to every one of my people to make sure that they had a tourniquet. And you could, basically it'd be like $1.50 a tourniquet. So it's gonna be pretty affordable if you have a group to use this stuff. So enough talking. Let me put this on myself. My arm's sore after messing with that rat's tourniquet. On yourself is getting that first wrap on. What I do is use my teeth. See, that's all you got to do is get that first wrap, and now it won't slip. But you can see how it's rolled up and it's getting tight. But it's harder when you're putting it on yourself to keep it wide, but it works. So, and the other part that gets difficult is the tuck part. Now you got to try to, you get to the end of it, you got to try to get a loose end up to tuck this under. A little bit of trick to that, but it's on there, so no pulse. So I might feel my arm getting numb. So it can be self-applied. It's not the easiest one. It's not as easy as a cat tourniquet, but you can do it. The other thing I like about this is it's so small. When you roll it up, it's soft, it's flexible, it's not stiff and hard like a cat. It's a lot easier to carry this. You could stick this in your pocket rolled up. Like I said, I've showed you, I just roll it over on my dowel rod and throw a rubber band around it, so I have it in there in my kit, and I can pull them both out pretty easily. It's not my main tourniquet. I've got that cat tourniquet I carry, but I keep this in my kit for a backup tourniquet. So the SWAT tourniquet, I like them. I'm not going to buy one, but I'll use these. But I think it's a pretty effective tourniquet, and it's got a good use in a kit. I saw a video one time, somebody was talking about these and called them like the Swiss Army knife of first aid kits or something like that. You know, you could make a sling out of this if you had a broken arm. You could cut this into shorter pieces like this, and if you were out hiking, somebody had a broken leg and you had to splint it, you could put the splint and you use this to fasten the splint, you know, like 3 of them down the length of it. You could use this if somebody had twisted an ankle out on a hike. You could wrap this around the ankle to put some good compression on it to keep the swelling down if they had to walk out. If I sat here, I could probably think of another dozen uses I could use this for in a first aid kit. So it's a pretty handy little thing to keep in there. So that's a SWAT tourniquet. Okay, now the last thing I want to talk to you about with tourniquets is improvised tourniquets. When the very first aid training I ever received was when I was in the Boy Scouts. And then after that, when I joined the Army. And we didn't have tourniquets. There was no such thing. I've never heard of a commercial tourniquet. A tourniquet was something that you improvise. And we learned in both Boy Scouts and the Army and later first aid classes as I got older in different occupations and different jobs and things, was how to improvise tourniquets. Now that's fallen out of fashion. I hear all the time, you know, improvised tourniquets aren't effective. And I've heard some stats about this Boston bombing that something like 90% or 97% of the tourniquets that were improvised failed, you know. Well, that's not because improvised tourniquets are bad. That's just because those improvised tourniquets were bad. If you know how to properly improvise a tourniquet, you can make a very effective tourniquet. The people who are promoting the fact that you have to have a commercial tourniquet are the people who manufacture commercial tourniquets. And they are the ones who will say, you cannot do an improvised tourniquet. They're not effective. They won't work. You know, it's a big waste of time. And that's nonsense. You can improvise a tourniquet. I'm just going to show you one way. When I made the IFAC kits for AMCON that we gave out, I showed people how they could use those materials to improvise a tourniquet. That was the first tourniquet video I made. I'm not going to go real depth into that. I'm just going to show you show you an example and give you some other ideas of how you could improvise a tourniquet if you had to. So let's go through that. All right, when you're selecting material to improvise a tourniquet, it's got to be something pretty stout. You can use an article of clothing from your patient. If you've got a pair of trauma shears, you can cut a strip of their t-shirt, you can cut a strip of their pants. What I included in our IFACs that I said use is Curlex, which is super handy stuff for a variety of things. Packing wounds, dressing wounds, it's just a roll of gauze. And it doesn't look like much, but this stuff is actually pretty tough. I have made tourniquets out of this before. What I would do is probably wrap a double wrap there and cut off a piece of it. You can put this over the arm, tie a knot, and then lay a stick. That's why I always carry that little piece of dowel rod in my IFAC. You can use that with anything. And you tie it over top of the stick. This time tie a double knot. And then the stick is your windlass, and you just crank it around and tighten it up. Now if I crank this hard enough, this will break because this arm is hard plastic and there's no give at all. And I can break this if I crank hard enough. But if this on a human arm, you can easily crank this down tight enough to make a sufficient tourniquet. I've done it on myself. It works. I've done it on other people in ER, and it's worked. I've done it before. It's not the most ideal stuff. It's not the strongest stuff in the world, but it's strong enough that you can make an adequate tourniquet using Curlex. This stuff is actually pretty tough. So you can also use a piece of webbing belt, something along those lines. So it's easier to just cut this off. See, this Tourniquets is very tough stuff. When you got it wrapped up like that, you can make a tourniquet out of it. This mannequin tends to slide out of this chair, so I throw a little piece of web belt over it. You could use something like this for a tourniquet. Same thing. Slide it over the arm, tighten it up, or put a knot in it. Wrap a stick of some sort and tighten it down. Belts are not my favorite. Your average belt that you wear is really thick, and they're leather. They're hard to twist like this. You can see this web belt, how it gets twisted up in a knot when you're twisting that windlass down. It's hard to twist like a thick leather belt like that. So belts typically don't make great tourniquets. But if you had a piece of web material or something like this, you could. That's about it on tourniquets. Once you put a tourniquet in place, the old rule of thumb when I was in the Army was 2 hours. They said if you had it in place, if it stayed in place any longer than 2 hours, you'd start getting tissue damage. Now, the modern stuff I've read actually says that's more like 6 hours, and they're not going to have permanent tissue damage and stuff. So don't be afraid to throw one on if you have to. A lot of the Stop the Bleed courses now, they automatically just go with throw a tourniquet on for everything. I'm still kind of old school. I'd probably, go, unless it's an arterial spray, which you can tell if it's spraying out like a garden hose. If it's pulsating when you're bleeding, that's arterial blood flow. You're going to want to throw a tourniquet on that. But if it's just a regular wound just bleeding, I would still go with direct pressure first. That's your number one front line way of stopping bleeding. It's not necessary to throw a tourniquet on, but like I said, a lot of the Stop the Bleed classes now, which I think are wonderful, getting a lot of people involved that really don't have first aid training, but they're willing to go and learn this stuff. They're just all about throwing a tourniquet on everything, and it's kind of hard to go wrong. If somebody's bleeding, you throw a tourniquet on, you're going to stop the bleeding, and that's good. So that's it, I guess. I'll wrap this one up for now. It's probably way too long as it is. This is Hannibal with your medical team. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate you, and I'll be coming out with some more videos in the future.